Yeah, old school. That's what I'm talking about. Listen, this ain't for everybody. Some of y'all need to hear this. I know you're in the trenches fighting, but check it out. I'm gonna put it down like this so I can help the saints understand. Everything you're going through is all part of the master plan. Or what? You thought cause you got saved everything was gonna be peaches and cream? You better wake up, son. Don't nothing come to a sleeper but a dream. Faith without works is dead. Read your Bible, you know what it says. He who don't work don't eat. Blackers don't get fed. Yeah, Jesus said he who puts his hands to the plow looks back the same ain't fit. Some of y'all ain't been in the trenches 5 minutes and you about ready to quit. I ain't mad at ya, I'm just hitting you with the real. If you died for me and I was still tripping, now how you think that make you feel? Check this out, deep game, this here's deep. Some of y'all ain't sowing nothing but you started trying to reach. But unto him who is able to possess your fathers by his glory. Struggles might be part of your testimony, but it ain't the end of the story. Now the point is this was prophesied way back in the day. Choir, sing your hook right here and see if the church can relate.
I know we can make it. I know good and well. I can work it out. Work it out. Work it out. Yeah, he'll work it out. I know we can make it. We can make it. I know good and well. I can work it out. Yes, he can. Yes, he can. Yes, he can. Yeah.
Thinking not strange, the fiery trials to try you. You say why you, but your church say what would Jesus do? Why you asking if he ain't trying to do what he's saying? He told you he was gonna have tribulations, but you thought he was playing. 1 minute you tell him how good God is and can't nobody beat the talk. The next minute you're backfighting so fast, it's like you're moonwalking. Oh yeah, I'm preaching to myself cause I ain't no better. It ain't like I've been following his every word, obeying it to the letter. But we soldiers, we gotta remember that. Regroup, stay on point. Yeah, bow down, confess, repent, stay humble, let him anoint. It ain't easy as I thought it was. I'd be lying if I told you that. But it showed up getting better all the time. Trust me, that's the fact. Ain't nothing we going through that can't be handled. God put that on his son. Like they say, you can shout now if you want to, cause the battle's already won. So while you're going through the valley, don't even trip. You're gonna be on top. Choir, sing your hook line one more again. This time you don't stop.
I know we can make it. We can make it. I know good and well. I can work it out. Yes, he can. Yes, he can. He'll work it out. We can make it. I know we can make it. I know good and well. Oh, I can work it out. Yes, he can. Yes, he can. If you let him, I know good and well. He can work it out. Work it out. Work it out. Work it out.
Yeah, everyone, I'm going to pump the brakes right there. It's my feeling, my belief, and I hope it is yours too, that Big Boy upstairs is going to work this thing out, this thing we call life, boy, because it's a lot of crazy-ish going on out there right about now. And I want to say thank you so much for joining us today. We know you could be spending your time somewhere else, you know, doing something else, but you're here with us this Sunday on Can of Play or Play. Greatly appreciated. As usual, we have a fantastic show lined up for you today. Our guest, Dr. Joseph Trunzo, who's a professor of psychology and department chair at Bryant University in Smithfield, Rhode Island. He's also served as deputy director at Bryant University Center for Health and Behavioral Science and is a practicing clinical psychologist. Also, Dr. Julie Luongo is also going to be joining us, who's a writer, editor, creator of the Creative Writing Program at Temple University and the author of The Hard Way. And we're going to be discussing A Survivor's Guide to Long-Haul COVID, which is, we're all dealing with that stuff right now. So we got to know how to handle it now, yesterday, and moving forward. So with that being said, let me see our guest with us. Dr. Trunzo, are you with us?
I am indeed. Thanks for having us on the show, Lamont. We appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Is Julie Luongo with us?
I'm here. Yep. Good to be here.
Please tell me. I hope I didn't mess up your last name. Too bad.
So for me, it's... go ahead, Julie.
It's Luongo. You say all the vowels.
Okay.
And for me, it's Trunzo, which is, fine. You nailed it pretty well.
Well, thank you, man. I hate that when I mispronounce someone's name.
No worries.
But thank you guys so much for joining us. I'm very excited to get into this show because, as you know, we're right in the midst of this pandemic, and people are confused on a lot of different levels. So, Dr. Trunzo, let's start with you, and I guess you can chime in. How can I address you guys? Let me get that first. You prefer me addressing you by your last name?
You can call me Joe, Dr. Trunzo. I don't. It doesn't really matter to me all that much. Whatever you're comfortable with, and whatever's going to make the show flow easier.
How about you?
Yeah, I go by Julie.
Okay, Julie. All right. Well, listen, you guys come from different spectrums, different area, but you end up at the same place. So, Dr. Trunzo, let's start with the acceptance commitment therapy. Let our listeners know what that's about.
So, acceptance and commitment therapy, in its sort of purest form, is it's an approach to psychotherapy. So similar to like people have probably heard of something like cognitive behavioral therapy or psychoanalysis or cognitive therapy, things along those lines. So acceptance and commitment therapy is an approach, theoretical approach to behavior change and to helping people to really kind of transform their suffering. It's rooted in solid behavioral science. They've been doing the work on this for decades at this point, and it incorporates, as I think you'll hear about as we continue to talk about it, a lot of Eastern philosophies and principles. It borrows heavily from things like Buddhism, as a lot of Western psychotherapy approaches are doing now. And its main goal and the main thrust of acceptance and commitment therapy is really to help people to transform their suffering. So for people who are really, on the edge and just feeling like there's no hope and that things are going as badly for them as they possibly can, it's about turning that around and finding a way to live a vital and meaningful life despite the fact that circumstances seem to be spiraling out of control.
Is that mostly related to this pandemic, or is it associated with trauma in one's everyday life? Acceptance and commitment therapy has been around a lot longer than the pandemic.
It's an approach to therapy that we call it's kind of transdiagnostic. So we use it for people who have all different kinds of problems: depression, anxiety, mood disorders, even schizophrenia, addiction. The bottom line is what it's out to help with is suffering. So whatever flavor your suffering takes, the principles of ACT can really be applied to it. There might be some nuances depending on what you're dealing with, but the core of it is really consistent across whatever the problem is, which is why Julie and I thought it would be a really excellent way to help people through the pandemic, whether they're having long-term medical issues or whether someone has long-haul COVID or not. We're all suffering from what's been happening over the last 18 months or so. So that's why we want to get the word out about this particular approach, because we think it can be really helpful to people.
How would an individual even know that he or she is suffering from effects of long-term COVID?
So that's a little tricky. So I'm not a medical doctor, so I want to be very careful about that. But the bottom line is we don't know a lot about long haul COVID. So the CDC estimates that about maybe 10% of people who get diagnosed with COVID end up having some kind of long-term symptoms. But I think that if people feel fine and then they get COVID and then the major symptoms seem to be resolved, but they have residual things where they continue not to feel right, suffering is not usually something that hides in humanity. If we're having a hard time, we tend to know it.
Right. Yeah, you explained that very, very well, because I was wondering about that. If I'm having an effect and I'm not sure the cause of the effect, how do I know how to seek help? If I'm not sure what it is or where it's coming from. Well, how did you get introduced to acceptance and commitment therapy?
Okay, well, I was an early editor on Joe's previous book, which is called Living Beyond Lyme, and that came out in 2016, which is about using ACT while navigating medical confusion when you're not feeling well. So that sounds familiar, right? That was basically about, how do you cope and live your life when you're not feeling well and you're faced with problems that would be frustrating in the best of times. So I got a lot out of that Lyme book, because I didn't have Lyme, but at the time I was dealing with a chronic condition, and it's called aging, and it's totally wrecking my body and my mind.
Julie, can
yeah.
Julie, can I stop you right there for 1 second? Explain
Yeah.
Lyme, because I'm sure a lot of our listeners don't even know what that is.
Oh, what Lyme disease is? It's a
Right.
tick-borne disease that's bacterial. In nature, but it can mess with any of your symptoms or with your systems of the body. So I mean it can cause chronic problems like COVID, and it's also a frustrating medical odyssey like COVID.
Okay.
Yeah. So I did some editing on that, and I got a lot out of it, and then I used it when I had my own struggle with long haul COVID.
So you had a bout with it yourself?
I did, yeah. So here's what happened to me. Early in the pandemic, I got a weird COVID cold. And then a couple of weeks after that, I got excruciating chest pains. And I was diagnosed with myocarditis, which is an inflammation of the heart muscle, and it's generally caused by a virus. So before the pandemic, I was working a 100% travel job that I really enjoyed, and probably how I got COVID. And while I was home recovering, the country went into lockdown and I was laid off. So I was feeling terrible and I lost my awesome job. So I've been using these ACT tools since 2016. And just, it's great for, if you are naturally avoidant, which I am, because ACT is focused on action. So taking committed action, thoughtful action, directed action. So generally speaking, humans are lazy, and we've evolved to conserve energy. So when you're sick and in pain and experiencing loss, being lazy or avoidant is even easier. So I really relied on ACT when I didn't feel well and I had an uncertain future. And there were people that were in worse and similar situations, and I just proposed to set it to Joe for COVID sufferers, and he agreed, as did Tim Ward, our editor at Changemakers, who's just truly a good person who cares about people. So he flipped us into the series on recovering.
Right, and I think a lot of people should be taking notes, and so they can be aware of this information. Dr. Trunzo, how did you come about writing a book about Lyme, and talk about that disease a little more?
Sure. So as Julie stated, Lyme disease is it's a tick-borne illness. So you get it when you're bitten by a tick, a certain kind of tick that's infected with the Lyme bacteria. And it has a what we would call sort of like a standard presentation, and it's usually can be treated with antibiotics if it's caught early, but the nature of the bacteria is such that it can really kind of invade and disrupt the functioning of any cell in the body. So it can have really persistent and pretty significant impact. So I came to write the book about Lyme. Most of my training in graduate school and in postdoctoral fellowship was about providing psychological services to people with chronic illnesses, mostly folks who have cancer. So, but in my personal life, a very close and dear family member ended up contracting Lyme, and then, living and working in New England, I also started to see, as I educated myself about Lyme to go on that journey with my loved one, I started to see things in my practice, and I started asking questions about whether or not this was a lot more prevalent than I had previously thought. So, I went to some conferences, I started reading, I educated myself, and then I thought, well, some of the things that I know and some of my background in training and helping people to cope with cancer and other chronic illnesses might be applicable here. And there are only a handful of people who are really doing work on the psychological implications of Lyme. So I kind of switched my focus and did a lot more work in that area, and then decided that some of the things that I was doing might actually be helpful. So, we thought that, getting the book out there might be a good way to get some information to the masses, because, not everybody has access to mental health care, let alone mental health care that's, from somebody who kind of really knows and understands Lyme. So putting the book out there was just a way to get this information out to people. And then, as Julie said, she was the editor on that book. She was one of my editors on that book. And when the pandemic happened and COVID hit, and when she ended up dealing and suffering with COVID, she found herself using a lot of the ACT tools. So she said, I really think we should do, like a re-editor or rewrite of the Lyme book for long haul COVID. And the structure of the book is such that I'm going through all of the, sort of the science-y psychotherapy stuff. But the really cool part is that Julie injects her voice into the book, talking about her experience with long haul COVID and how she applied the ACT principles and how they were helpful for her. So, so it's not just some nerdy science guy talking about nerdy psychotherapy things. There's also someone who actually, really went through this and used these things in a meaningful way. So, we think it's a good read, like I said, not only for people who are suffering specifically from long-haul COVID, but we've all been suffering in some way, shape, or form as a result of the pandemic, and these principles can be applied to, like I said, whether it's depression or anxiety or loneliness or economic hardship or unemployment or whatever. I think we can all agree nothing is the same as it was 2 years ago. And those differences have been really hard for people, and a lot of people are suffering. And since acceptance and commitment therapy is designed specifically to help people to live well when they're suffering, that's why we decided to put the book out and get this information in the hands of as many people as we can.
Well, two things. One, I'm just kind of blown away because I don't hear society talking much about Lyme. At least I wasn't really familiar with it until now.
Where are you located?
There are.
No, I just said where are you located, Lamont?
Oh, I'm the West Coast.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's so Lyme infections have been documented in all 50 states, and also really a significant number of foreign countries. So it's certainly most prevalent in the northeastern United States, but it's everywhere in varying degrees. The West Coast, it's considerably less prevalent than it is in the Northeast, but up where Julie and I are, you probably can't throw a rock without hitting somebody who's either had or knows someone who has encountered some kind of Lyme infection. It's very, very prevalent here. And it's growing. So, this may be the first time you've heard about it. I promise you it's not going to be the last. Wow, at least it's always important to say knowledge is power. So it's great that I'm getting educated today, and hopefully some of our listeners as well. Julie, you found this to be a natural fit for you, the long-haul COVID guide. And you said you were practicing
absolutely.
You said you was practicing since 2016. When did you first notice that you had COVID?
Well, I got it early. I got it before that we even had tests in my area. So mine is not actually confirmed, except from doctors on the back end saying, like, yeah, that's probable and most likely what happened, because there's no reason why I should have gotten myocarditis. And since, like, it was super early. So, like, I had the myocarditis and then we started locking down. So it was on that front end. And but myocarditis has been diagnosed in lots of people now, and in fact it was one of the side effects of one of the vaccines as well. Like some young men were getting it. So it's just an infection that is caused by your own immune system. It's not an infection, it's just it's an inflammation. Sorry.
Right. A question for both you guys to the left. What do you guys think about this vaccine hesitancy out there?
Julie, you can go first.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, I understand there are reasons why people should be hesitant, could be. I just happen to side with the scientists on the efficacy. I would be more afraid of getting COVID again than some side effect of the vaccine. So
you feel like the risk of not taking it outweighs the risk of taking it?
I do.
Okay. Agreed. How do you feel, Dr. Trunzo?
So, I've actually thought about this quite a bit because, being a behavioral scientist, I like to try to figure out why people do the things that they do and why they don't do the things that they don't do. So, I mean, from my perspective, whether or not someone gets the vaccine really depends a lot on their risk tolerance and their risk perception. So some people perceive the risk of getting COVID as significantly less, but they see the risk of getting the vaccine, it's been, we have emergency use authorization. It's not fully approved by the FDA. And we certainly don't have any long-term studies because it hasn't been around long-term. So I can understand people's hesitancy about wanting to inject themselves with something that they're not sure what the impact of that is going to be, 5, 10 years down the road. You can make the exact same argument for getting COVID. So a lot of people, their risk perception and their risk tolerance for getting COVID, their risk perception is lower and their tolerance is higher for getting COVID. So those people are probably not going to be likely to get the vaccine. Other people's risk perception for COVID is high and their tolerance is very low, so they're much more likely to get the vaccine. So, those are the reasons behind why I think people are making the decisions that they're making.
So, as a clinical psychologist, do you see yourself talking to people on both sides of the spectrum?
Most of the people in my practice are not what I would call vaccine hesitant. I haven't really run into, a lot of my clients, I haven't run into any of my clients who have had real struggles with whether or not they're going to get the vaccine. Most of them have. In fact, all of them have, to my knowledge. But I do know people who have concerns about the vaccine and who haven't been vaccinated. But I'm not their psychologist. It's not, and even if I was their psychologist, it's not my job to make decisions for them. It's my job, to treat them as human beings and be respectful of whatever they decide to do, and understand where they're coming from and help them to understand their reasoning behind their behavior.
Okay. Well, listen, I understand there's quite a few reasons for people to be depressed and going through all kind of different situations dealing with COVID. Is there any quick inroads to someone that could help them feel better right now? I notice every time somebody turn on the TV, they almost can feel bad about something. But something that you can utilize that can help them feel better.
So I can mention a couple things. This actually wasn't on my list, but what you just said triggered it. So I often when I've seen a lot of people who have been really overwhelmed by all the information, and all the information seems bad because that's what, it's kind of the way the news is, and that's how they do things. So I frequently prescribe what I call like news breaks. I have people shut off the news feed on their phone. There's part of me that feels like we were a much less anxious and depressed society when we got the morning newspaper and we watched the hour-long local and national news from 6 to 7 at night, and that was pretty much it. So the 24/7 bombardment of information can really feed a lot of distress and negativity. So I encourage people to find that balance between being an informed citizen and knowing what's going on, but not being completely consumed by news. So you actually raise a really good point there. From an ACT perspective, probably the simplest thing that people can do is to really, I use the term noticing a lot. So what we tend to do and what our natural inclinations are, as Julie mentioned, is we want to avoid things. So if something is unpleasant or something feels uncomfortable, we tend to want to avoid it and run away from it. And a lot of this stuff is very automatic. So like the thoughts that are running through our head or the emotions that we're experiencing, they happen very, very quickly, and we're not even always necessarily consciously aware of them. So a big part of acceptance and commitment therapy is to notice. Pay attention to what you're thinking, pay attention to what you're feeling in your body, pay attention to your emotional experience, pay attention to your sensory experiences, and try to stay grounded in the current moment. And sometimes the easiest and quickest way to just be present is to zero in and focus on your sensory experience, because your sensory experience is always of the moment. So what are you seeing? What are you hearing? What are you touching? What are you smelling? And just pay really exquisite attention to that. And that in and of itself can be very grounding. And most of the time when we try to do that, we'll get pulled away, we'll get distracted, we'll start thinking about other stuff. So it's our job to kind of notice that and then come back to what we want to be attending to. And then just the more you do that and the more you repeat it and the more you practice it, the better you end up actually getting at it.
Okay, Julie, this one is for you. I know you said that you used some of these tools when you were recovering. Was it simple for you, or was it difficult?
Well, I had different experiences, but I'll tell you what I think is the simplest tool, and this is in the book, and it's right up front. Because I think this is one of the things that you can do right away to feel well when you are like spinning on something that is upsetting you. And it's a diffusion trick. And, Joe knows all the science about it. But in essence, what you do is you use language to reframe what's upsetting you. So like, here's an example. There was a long stretch of time when I thought I should be feeling better and I wasn't, because, it would be like a good day would be followed up by 3 bad days. And, it's really frustrating. So I would be on the couch and like huddled up with a pillow thinking like, oh, great, now my day is shot. And then that would escalate to, I'm never going to be able to do anything active again. So this is like black and white thinking. And I think, other CBT, so you're supposed to counter this as false, but I really didn't know that if that was true or false. So true or false doesn't matter with ACT. You just circumvent this whole process by changing your language on it. So here's the thing that's grinding in my head. I'm never going to be able to do anything active again. This is upsetting me. with this diffusion technique, you just change the wording to, I'm having the thought that I'm never going to be active again. Or as I notice, I'm having the thought that I'll never be active again. And so, like, putting I'm having the thought in front of the thought for me instantly works, because it pulls the focus off the content of the thought and it puts my focus on the thought itself. And then suddenly I'm a person who's having a thought and not a person who is having like a dire circumstance. And once there's distance like that, I can have more flexibility with that thought, and I can see it as that likely absurd, or I can just label it as not useful and move on. So it just takes a lot of weight off of like these negative thoughts that we're having, just by putting, like changing it into, changing the perspective. Yeah. So that one is easy. And it's always about thinking to use the tools.
Wow. Okay. It sounds easy, but it seems like in today's society, it's so difficult for people to really keep focus. It seems like they're getting sideswiped repeatedly during the course of the day.
So, look, I mean, you're right, Lamont. So there are two things. There are two things about that. So that's where the noticing comes into play, right? So if you're noticing and you're paying attention to what's going on, you'll see that you're getting sideswiped, and then you can bring yourself back to hopefully a better place. And then the other thing is, and this is a really, really important point about acceptance and commitment therapy. None of this is based on talent. You don't have to be a gifted person in any of this. Like, anybody can learn how to do this. These are skills, and they come with practice, and they require continual practice. So even somebody who feels like they quote unquote know their stuff, you're still going to get sidetracked. You're still going to end up going down certain paths that you don't want to go down. It's just about kind of continually catching yourself. And, the example that Julie gave is really good. You're creating this distance between what you're thinking and feeling versus what your actual experience is. And, in ACT, we call that psychological flexibility. We're trying to promote this sense of allowing ourselves to think what we're thinking and feel what we're feeling without it being ultimately determinative of who we are and what happens to us. We tend to be fairly consumed by our own thought processes and our own feelings, and we think that our thoughts and our feelings determine our reality, but they don't have to. When they do, then we're very psychologically inflexible, and we exert all kinds of energy towards controlling all of that stuff. And the example that Julie gave is a really good one, because it's like she's not really trying to change the thought that she's having. She's not sitting there arguing with herself saying, no, I will be active again, because like she said, we don't really know. But in that moment, her being able to say to herself, I notice that I'm having a thought that I might not be active again. Now she can ask the question, well, so that's a thought. Is it really useful or functional for me to engage in that thought right now? Does it do me any good? Does it move me in any real positive direction? Not really. And it allows her to just kind of let that thought sort of move on, as opposed to being completely consumed by it.
That's pretty heavy. Listen, for those that just joined the show, if you'd like to make a comment or ask a question, please, on your phone, you could dial 929-2870. Press number 1 on your phone. Let us know you're there, and we'll be glad to let you join the conversation. Guys, I know people usually want to make changes when they're feeling better, but they say that they're going to do it when they're not feeling so good. So what is that? Is that a natural human emotion?
So I think when someone's not feeling well, particularly chronically, they think about what they want their life to be like and what they want to do, and because they're not feeling well and doing what they might envision doing feels really hard or overwhelming or too taxing or too much, then if they can't do X, they put everything on hold, and that's the thing that we're trying to actually counteract. So you may not be able to do X, but if you look at X, so let's say someone says like, geez, I'd love to go out for, I'd love to go to my kid's little league game, but I can't get there. So you might not be able to get there, and that's okay, but what version of that, or what can you do that might actually help you to engage in that in some way, right? Can you send somebody to sort of live stream the game? Can you talk to your kid after they get home and have them tell you all about it? There are things that you can do that might not be the ideal of what you would want them to do, but engage in the things that are still meaningful and important to you, rather than having this, I can't go to the game, therefore this is lost to me. There are ways to work around it and still engage in the aspects of the activity that are meaningful and of value to you, and that's how you keep moving yourself forward and staying engaged, even if you're not feeling 100%.
Right. And I think that's what I read, something that you mentioned. You can still live well even if you don't feel well.
Yeah, I mean, you might not be able to live as well as you would like, and you're probably most certainly not going to be living as well as you would like if you're sick. But it's not a binary. It's not a binary equation, right? So if you can't live exactly the way that you want to live, that doesn't mean that you still can't engage in meaningful and important things in your life. So it's just about finding the workarounds, and ACT is particularly geared towards that. The acronym, it's acceptance and commitment therapy, but the acronym is ACT, and that's not on accident, right? It's a very, very behavioral, action-oriented approach.
It's funny you would mention that, because I was just reading that and thinking about the same thing, acceptance and commitment therapy, and looking at the word of acceptance and knowing the description of that word, and commitment and knowing the definition of that word. So I didn't think that was accidental. I was just making a statement, Dr. Trunzo, because those are just
okay.
So
I'm sorry. I didn't know if you were asking a question or.
No. I was just thinking about those two words that were very powerful as far as acceptance, commitment, and therapy.
Yeah, it is not accidental.
Those words mean.
Yeah, it's not accidental at all. They're very very specifically chosen.
Right. And in order to find help, you definitely have to do those things, or to survive.
The word acceptance can be a little bit loaded. So a lot of people, when they hear that word, they think that it means, oh, well, there's nothing you can do. You just have to kind of suck it up and pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and there's no way you can change anything. And that's not really what acceptance and commitment therapy is about. In the ACT context, acceptance is really it's recognizing what your current situation is. There might be something that is, that you might like to be able to change, but for some reason you can't in the moment. So it's about recognizing that, being open to that experience, not being judgmental, not really struggling against it, but allowing yourself to move through it and get to the other side, and engaging in behavior that feels valuable and meaningful to you along the way. That's the commitment part, is the engaging in behavior.
And I guess where my mind is jumping right now is a lot of people are in denial. And I guess they would have to really accept the fact that there is some type of issue to even get moving forward. How do we get from all that denial point?
Denial it's a form of avoidance, right? So, like we said, it's really kind of against human nature to lean into things that are painful and difficult and uncomfortable. And a lot of the skills that are discussed in the book are designed to help people to be more comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? Because as human beings, we're not particularly good at that. But like everything else we're talking about, that's a skill that you can build. And if you develop the ability to be more comfortable with being uncomfortable, then the need for denial and avoidance tends to dissipate, right? And when you start to lean into it and you develop some confidence in your ability to move through these things, then you're much more likely to move through them. But you have to be able to recognize that things aren't the way that you want them to be or you would prefer them to be, and that kind of comes back to the noticing that we talked about before.
Right.
I can interject here on denial.
Sure.
I have a denial story that can illuminate some of this. All right, so acceptance is great in the abstract. Like, I don't have a problem with that word, and I'm fairly pragmatic and, like, mostly open to reality under normal circumstances. But I had a huge blind spot when I was in pain. So, like, and denial is exactly about having a giant blind spot. So, like, I'm having these chest pains, and I got them on a Thursday night, and I spent the next 3 days, like, curled up on the couch having really bad chest pains with my husband, like, trying to get me to go to see a doctor. So they got so bad that I finally decided to do that. But what I did was I went to an urgent care clinic and tried to convince the doctor I had a chest cold. So that is some really deep denial. So later, when that doctor was begging me to go to the ER, I realized that I had been in denial for like 4 full days. So now I know, like, that I had like a freeze response when she was begging me. Like, she begged me like 4 different times in different ways, and I just stood there. And I'm not usually like that. Like, I am a talker. So I know now that when I feel like I'm freezing, then that's a cue for me that I should apply some acceptance and, like, be open to reality, because I am in some sort of denial. So, that's, again, back to noticing. Like, I had to dial into, like, my unusual behavior in that scenario. Yeah. So that's my idea.
Got to keep it real with yourself.
Yeah.
That is true, yes. It is not easy, but it's necessary.
No, it's not easy, is it? Well, Dr. Trunzo, how do we find our values?
So this is the part of ACT that I actually like the most. So when you're talking about all the accepting and all those sorts of things, and being open to all these difficult and uncomfortable things that you can't control, it feels like everything is sort of like, okay, well, what can I control? Well, the values are the part that you actually own and are completely and utterly determined by you. You have 100% control over this. So the thing with values is, like, the best way to think of them is that they're kind of like decision-making guideposts or markers, right? They're not goals, because values can never be achieved, right? So I might have the goal of, like, I'm gonna work out every day, but that the value behind that is that I want to be as healthy as I can be. Right. So if we look at the different areas of our life, family, work, leisure, health, spirituality, those sorts of things, what we want to do is kind of drill down into what is it about those particular areas that are the most meaningful and important to you. And then once you figure out what those are, then the idea is that every decision that you make about what you do should move you towards those values. And if they're not, then they're moving you away from your values, and then that's problematic. So I have, I have two wonderful daughters, and almost every decision that I make in my life is informed by my value of wanting to be the best dad that I can be. So I carry that with me to work. I carry that with me in my interactions with them. I carry that with me in my relationship with my wife, because I want them to, to experience having a good, invested father who loves and cares about them. That's meaningful to me. So there are things that I don't do because it's not in line with that value, and there are things that I do. And the trick is that sometimes, in fact, often, moving towards what we value is painful and difficult, but it's easier to accept that pain and difficulty if it's in line and moving you towards something that is meaningful to you. So when my kids were little, and I'd just send them to their room or impose some kind of discipline, it's excruciatingly painful for me. I hated it, but I did it anyway because I knew that I wanted to raise them to be, responsible, decent human beings. So when you have a good sense of what your values are, it makes the acceptance component easier, because if you're moving towards what you value, even if that involves some kind of pain or discomfort, you can carry that with you a little bit more lightly, because it's got, you've got some juice behind it. As opposed to if you're just sort of spending all your time trying to avoid pain and discomfort, and you're not being value driven, that's where suffering comes from.
Well, I like that. That's another powerful message, Dr. Trunzo. Definitely appreciate you for sharing that, because if your heart's in the right place and everything's lined up, it makes it easier for you to do what you have to do.
That's the idea.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Julie, how did your values get you through your recovery?
Okay, well, I don't have kids, so so I'm going to tell you a different kind of value. So I had to build my heart muscle back up, and so to do this, I had to convince myself to prioritize my health every day. And of course, I value my health, but that is a little abstract for me. I like to hike and be active because I enjoy spending time in nature and doing activities with friends, but not because I inherently find exercise enjoyable. So I had to connect my values to my health. And so this is in the books. Joe's got a bunch of exercises for how to do this, but one of them is to look to your pain. Like I said, I was upset about, that I wasn't going to be an active person anymore. And, but I was mostly upset on how this was going to impact the way I travel, because I really like to travel. I like to squeeze the most out of every trip. And, so I used my desire to be an active traveler to push me to do my cardio every day, which was slow walks to start, and that I had to sit and catch my breath. And and if I wanted to blow it off, or when I got frustrated, which was often, I just reminded myself that I was training to do something that I love. And that works for me even now. And when I'm back to some normal activity, and when I hoist my weights, I think I'm lifting a backpack into the overhead compartment, and I'm good.
Julie, I know you're author of The Hard Way. Was that? Did you write that during your sickness? Was that before or after?
No, I wrote that in 2008, so it's about time I get back to that writing.
Okay, very well. A Survivor's Guide to Long Haul COVID, Dr. Trunzo.
Yes.
What's next in store for you? Are you doing any tours, or what are you doing?
A tour. So the book just came out at the beginning of the month. So, we're trying to get the word out as much as we can. My schedule doesn't permit me the luxury of doing a tour, so I'm not a full-time writer. I have classes to teach. I have administrative responsibilities at the university. I have a private practice, and clients and patients that I can't really abandon for to do a month-long tour. So opportunities like this, for which we're deeply appreciative, to talk about the book and get the word out, and we put some press releases out, and we'll just keep plugging away. And if there's anybody out there who wants me to speak or do anything, we're always up for those sorts of things. But we're going to do the best we can to publicize it with within the restrictions that I'm kind of bound to.
Right. Well, it seems like as the day is moving forward, I mean, the need and the demand for your book seems like it's definitely going to increase.
It certainly appears that way, and that's I wish that weren't the case, but a lot of people have been infected by this virus, and a lot of people seem to be suffering some pretty long-term medical issues. But like I said, even if if anybody's out there who's listening, even if you haven't been infected by COVID, and even if you were and you're not having long-term symptoms, we've all been affected by the pandemic in some way, shape, or form. The world is suffering and has been suffering considerably. So the tools and the approaches and the strategies in the book are applicable to really just about anything. So if somebody's struggling in any way, shape, or form, or they feel like they're suffering, we think that the things in the book can be useful and helpful.
Well, I don't want to be the one to tell you this, but look like you're going to be a busy guy.
Well, if I'm busy for the right reasons, doing the right things, I'm okay with that, Lamont. As long as it's value driven, right? So,
look, it's definitely going to be value driven if you're looking at it from the aspect of helping save humanity as some of the other human beings, because look like they need all the help that they can get right about now, and look like your teachings in your book is right on time with everything. Unfortunately, but it is fortunately for you, but unfortunately, I don't even know how to say that. Fortunately, but unfortunately, but fortunately, because people need to read what you have to say.
Thank you. We're deeply appreciative to Tim Ward and Changemakers books for kind of recognizing the value and putting this in the Reset series, because really the idea here is that. The hope, which, it's a grand hope for sure, but if we can use what's happened in the pandemic as a way to change how we approach suffering and difficulty in our lives, and if we're able to apply some of these principles and quote-unquote reset how we deal with suffering, then, maybe some good can come out of all of this, and the world can be a better place afterwards, and even if it's just, one person at a time.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty sure some good come out of it, because if nothing else, this COVID thing is making everyone, and I mean everyone, take a hard look at themselves and think about who they are, what they've been doing, and where they hope to go in the future. So you didn't tell everybody where they could go obtain your book, so definitely do that now, please. Let everybody know where they can get a copy.
Yeah, thank you. So it's available on Amazon. That's probably the easiest way to get it. It is in bookstores. So if you have a local bookstore or you're close to one of the big chains, feel free. It's also available on the Changemakers website. But the fastest and easiest way is probably on Amazon. And if anybody reads it and they like it, I would also encourage them to review it, because the more it gets reviewed, then the more it gets seen on Amazon. But it is available on Amazon.com, as is the Lyme book. They're both out there. So if people are dealing with anything chronic, or they feel like they're suffering or struggling with just about anything, both of those books I think can be helpful to them, and that's the whole point. That's why we put it out there.
Yeah, and I like the fact that people start noticing the fact that it is a situation, and you can seek help for that situation, but come out of that denial place.
It's a tough place to leave, but it's better on the other side, I promise.
Yeah, I think that's the part they're scared of. They done got comfortable in that position that they're in. So they say they want to do better, but it definitely takes a little bit more than talking about it. So, Julie, what's next for you? I know you're getting back to your writing.
Yeah, I am. I hacked some of these ACT tools to get back to writing fiction, because I'm not great at being, I'm not great with my own commitments. Those are the first thing to give, and but I'm absolutely reliable to other people. So I got myself an accountability partner to do what I want to do. So I would be disappointing her if I didn't write. I totally recommend this.
Hey, look! You didn't took a whole bunch of major steps because you're honest with yourself. You know.
So I can tell you, Lamont,
yeah.
if the one of the best things that could come out of Julie using the ACT approach is her second novel, because her first one was amazing, and I've been waiting for the second one since 2008. So I'm glad that she's earnestly writing.
Great. Hold on, guys. I think we have a caller here.
Great.
323, you on? Hello. 323, you're on. Well, I guess they accidentally pressed the number or forgot what they wanted to say. But anyway, guys, definitely for those who joined the show late, the show will be available in its entirety in a couple of minutes worldwide. So you have no excuse not to hear it. The time is right. Right now. I mean, we're going through this thing. Both our guests gave you guys some very, very valuable information. And like I always say, there's no excuse for you not to be able to hear the show. Ask your neighbor across the street, ask your mother, father, the guy at the gas station, your milkman. Somebody can tell you where you could hear this show. And definitely try to practice some of these things, I guess, laid out for you, too, to help you get through this thing called COVID. We're in the middle of it right now. I don't see any end nowhere in the near future. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. If you do, please call us. We'd like to have you on the show to talk about the end in the near future that you see. The office number is 323-957-7322. Call us up and let us know what you got. We're glad to have you on the show to talk about it. Dr. Trunzo, Julie Luongo, I thank you guys so very much, and good luck in the future with your book. Please feel free to come back at any time. The door is open for you. We love to have guests such as yourself that can actually give a positive word and touch some of these people out here, the hard-headed ones, the ones walking around with their eyes wide open that are still asleep. Hopefully, you guys will be able to wake them up and to facilitate some change. And again, I just want to say thank you so very, very much.
Thanks so much for the time and the opportunity to be on the show, Lamont. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so very
much.
Yes,
thanks so much.
Appreciate you, and you guys be safe out there.
You too.
You too.
All right, everybody, you heard my spiel. You know where you can hear the show. No excuse. We're going to see you guys next week, same time, 2:30 TST and turn on the air conditioner, let the windows down, and we're going to take you home with this other one by Praise Master T.
I'm getting to the point now when I get to church, I want to ask somebody, did you mess up before you got saved? So they can say yes. I say, you're the one I want to sit with, because I know you're going to praise the Lord. I don't want to sit with no dude with the good choosy who feels like I don't need to lift him up because I already have. Well, why you sitting there like you're dead or something? You got your praise on too. You ought to be bumping, jumping, shouting and running on your feet for the second coming. Miss me with that attitude, sweet. You want me to be cool, but I ain't, cause I can't. Cause if you only know what he done for me, the things I used to do, how I used to be, I can't lie. I got to testify, I was blind. He opened up my eyes. I know you sanctified now, but there was a time, if it hadn't been for God, you'd have lost your mind. Get with this, I don't miss or resist this. The Lord is not slack concerning his promises. I feel a shout coming on about now. Y'all pray for me, cause it's finna get loud. Turn up your praise. Turn it up, turn it up. Come on. Turn up your praise. Yeah. Turn it up, turn it up. I feel the spirit of God here. Test 1, 2, is this microphone on? Y'all still sitting down like something's wrong. If the Lord rushes through another day, come on, clap your hands and give God the praise. I know you don't mind praising when the going's good. You want to show him love and how well you should. But can you still praise him through the pains and hurts? Oh yeah, now we having church when money's low, work is slow, won't nothing grow. You're feeling low. That's when it's time to let the devil know he got to go. You ain't taking no more. And after having done all you can to stand, throw your hands back, lift up your hands, begin to thank the Lord for what he's already done. Count your blessings out loud, one by one. Turn up your praise. Come on. Turn it up, turn it up. Everybody. Turn up your praise. Woo. Turn it up, turn it up. I feel the spirit of God here. Turn up your praise. Hallelujah. Turn it up, turn it up. Turn up your praise. Turn it up, turn it up. Victory shall be mine. Oh yeah.
Now let me tell you something.
Oh yeah.
If you don't get any other taste this year,
Oh yeah.
God is moving us
Oh yeah.
into a new level.
Oh yeah.
I'm ready to shout now because I already know what I'm going to say.